We are just days away from Trump's second inauguration, and since November, it has been such a weird, chaotic political time period as we all watch Trump prepare to take office.
It's been so irregular. Like, we've never had a president tweet and kill a bill before even being sworn in. Like, it almost feels like he's already president.
And that has a lot of people, especially liberal women, advocating for drastic action. So hours after Trump's victory, we saw posts of women breaking up with their Republican boyfriends and shaving their heads to protest beauty standards. And in that vein, Google searches for the 4B movement surged by 450%.
All I have to say is good luck getting laid. Me and my girlies are participating in the 4B movement.
Now that I'm done crying, let's talk about the 4B movement, and it's slowly implementing its way to the United States, because after last night's results, I think it's time we kick it into overdrive.
A lot of y'all have been asking me my thoughts on the 4B movement. You do what you gotta fucking do, you know? The 4B movement is honestly proof that women have far more power than men have ever led you to believe, bitch.
The 4B movement is a radical feminist movement that originated in South Korea and denounces men, marriage, and children.
The letter B means no in Korean, so there's 4 things they say no to. No sex, dating, childbirth, or marriage. Basically, women who embrace the 4B movement try to cut men out of their lives to protest deep-rooted social inequality and structural patriarchy, which is a huge problem in South Korea.
South Korea has always struggled with gender inequality. The word feminism is actually basically considered a slur there. So obviously the 4B movement was the first of its kind and started a decade ago in the wake of several high-profile incidents of violence against women that incited national rage. And the major one was when a woman was killed near a Seoul subway station by a man who did it because he felt ignored by women.
At the time of the murder, spy camera pornography rings were spreading in South Korea. Abortion was illegal. Sexual harassment was common. The gender pay gap was one of the most extreme in the world. And marriage and pregnancy often marked the end of women's careers.
And 4B activists say that the only way to convince society to take women's safety seriously is to denounce men who have all the power altogether until something changes. And it's been difficult to measure the exact impact of the 4B movement since the movement is largely online and all the members are anonymous. But notably, marriage rates in South Korea have dropped 40% in the past decade.
They have the lowest birth rate in the world, so they're literally running out of kids. Like last year, 150 schools had no new first graders.
And there's obviously a lot of factors that go into declining birth rates, but with this anti-marriage, anti-children sentiment kind of going rampant, it's been difficult to reverse this trend.
Yeah, more than half of Gen Z South Koreans no longer think having kids is necessary.
And the government doesn't love that. President Yoon Suk-yeol wants to abolish the Gender Equality Ministry and has said that feminist movements were, quote, blocking healthy relationships between men and women in the country.
Sure, blame the women.
Most progressive movements do stem in the West and then later influence the East, but this has been the other way around, which is pretty cool.
So with this context, the surge of American women interested in 4B is eye-opening. And to quote Politico, it prompts us to reflect on how much society has taken for granted and overlooked the rights and freedoms that women rightly deserve. And Vanity Fair even called 4B a logical response to MAGA.
4B tries to send the message of the importance of bodily autonomy, which is critical in the US right now amidst the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Some women are also disheartened that a majority of men voted for someone with multiple sexual abuse convictions. And on top of that, we are seeing this rise in online misogyny where men are taking Republican-rooted talking points to attack and degrade women online.
2024 was even called the gender election, not just because Kamala Harris is a woman and a lot of women's issues were center stage, but also because the Republican ticket appealed to male identity and gender grievances in order to court the bro vote. And there's a lot of reasons that Trump won, but no demographic shifted more than young men who went for Trump by 14%.
If you're a dude under the age of 30 and you have any hobbies whatsoever, whether it's playing video games, whether it's working out, whether it's, I don't know, listening to like a history podcast or whatever, everything is completely dominated by right-wing politics. Everything that they see is right-wing sentiment being expressed by individuals that they find charismatic, thought leaders, influencers that they subscribe to. And I think that is some of the reason why you see this movement.
And that's really interesting to hear because as women, we don't, naturally exist in those spaces. We are not over inundated with like bro culture messaging. But to define it at its core, bro culture is fueled partly by resentment of shifting gender dynamics where men have less power in this version of society.
Yeah, for so long, the male breadwinner norm has kind of been a cultural anchor, but now it's being turned on its head and men aren't happy about that and they can feel like they're becoming obsolete. Studies actually show that husbands are happiest when their wives contribute 40% to the family's income, but any percentage above that increases their anxiety.
And this change in gender dynamics even has women shaking up the traditional dating space. They're questioning marriage and kids and their roles, and that is leading to some upset men. New York Times Opinion published an article, How Our Messed Up Dating Culture Leads to Loneliness, Anger, and Donald Trump.
Well, we've been reporting on the gender divide and the resulting singleness epidemic for a while now.
Yeah, there's a gigantic mismatch in the nation's dating pool. So for each single liberal woman, there exists 0.6 single liberal young men. And interestingly, conservative young men have it even worse, with just 0.5 single conservative young women available to choose from.
Well, remember when we spoke to dating expert Alana Dunn and she told us about a conservative friend's dating woes?
Yeah, well, I have a friend of mine. He used to come to me for like dating advice often. And, he said like, Alana, I'm going out with these girls and they're coming over and everything's going really well. And after they come over, I never hear from them again. And I said, is your MAGA hat on your bookshelf? He said, yeah. I go, that could be.
And Alana's not the only one catching on to this idea of camouflaging political beliefs.
Being a straight white dude that likes Trump but is only into liberal women is a lot like being in the closet. Because it's like they're going to ask you about it eventually. And you have to say what we all say, which is, I don't really follow politics. There's levels to this, man. You got to be discreet. You got to be really good at it. And it's not that hard once you get used to it. You just lie a lot.
And unfortunately, this frustration has led to an undercurrent of misogyny in favor of a hyper-masculine, alpha male macho vibe in a lot of the media that men are consuming. And we know we're being stereotypical right now.
Yes, this is not obviously every single individual man, but we're illustrating the trends that have been growing in the media that men consume.
And when these ideas are shared by trusted messengers who you look up to and admire, we're all human. We all absorb what we hear, especially when it's woven into apolitical spaces.
And that brings us to Trump, who isn't just reaching people by campaigning at rallies anymore. He has really branded himself as a guy's guy. He's sitting ringside at UFC fights. He's investing big in crypto and going on a dozen of the biggest podcasts for men like Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, and Logan Paul.
And Trump knows how important these podcasts are to his favorability with men. We freaked out when UFC CEO Dana White said this when he was on stage with Trump during his election night victory speech.
I want to thank some people real quick. I want to thank the Nelk boys, Aiden Ross, Theo Vaughn, Bustin' with the Boys, and last but not least, the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan.
And Trump courted clearly a lot of different types of bros. Like Elon Musk is obviously the billionaire free thinker tech bro.
Or Dave Portnoy and Harrison Butker are the sports bros.
Then of course we have RFK, the pedigreed crunchy conspiracy bro.
And we can't forget Jason Aldean and Kid Rock, the country music bros.
And all of these bros, for different reasons, see Trump as a symbol of traditional masculinity.
And because Trump's strategy to harness bro power was a success, The Guardian named 2024 the year of the bro.
Every movement has its extremists, and this is no different because after Trump's win, some of these bros took things way too far. We've seen women are property signs pop up at university rallies in the South, and there was an over 4,000% increase of the phrase "your body, my choice" on social media.
Hey bitch, we control your bodies. Guess what? Guys win again, okay? Your body, my choice. There will never, ever be a female president. Never. There will never be a female president, ever. It's over. Glass ceiling? Dude, it's a ceiling made of fucking bricks. You will never break it.
This obviously creates a mood of terror for women in the country, so they've been flying into action to prepare themselves for any eventuality of Trump's presidency, especially when it comes to reproductive rights. So requests for birth control has surged 966% after Trump won the election.
And requests for permanent sterilizations have gone up. Planned Parenthood reported a 760% increase in IUD appointments, and vasectomy appointments increased by 1,200.
Sales of value packs of emergency contraception, which is 4 doses instead of 1, was up more than 7,000%. And the abortion pill has a shelf life of about 5 years, and Plan B has a shelf life of 4 years.
Which would interestingly last through Trump's presidency.
And that ties back to the 4B movement because it calls for women to abstain from sex as another way to protect themselves.
And whether these women in the US are really calling off men or not, we don't know. But what's clear is that they are promoting a more drastic mindset to make sure that their points get across.
Well, with Trump, who's a lightning rod of this gender divide, re-entering center stage for another 4 years, safe to say it's not going away anytime soon.
And if you're feeling fired up, you can join the People's March that's taking place all around the country on Saturday. It was formerly known as the Women's March. You've all probably heard of it. The first one was the largest single-day protest in American history at the time.
And they've rebranded to be more inclusive to LGBTQ plus people or immigrants or anyone who'd want to protest the incoming administration and to steer away from a radical feminist image.
And it's interesting to see how women all around the world are trying to make their voices heard, because on one hand, we talked about the 4B movement. That's this like radical movement that denounces men altogether. And then on the other hand, we have this like very famous protest that is rebranding to have a more moderate approach in the hopes that it can bring widespread change.